I'm Caitriona Perry in Washington, and this is BBC World News America. Dozens are reported killed in Gaza after an airstrike hits a refugee camp in the north of the territory. Israel's military has confirmed that its jets carried out the attack and that the strike killed a senior Hamas commander. Two US cabinet secretaries make the case for more funding for Ukraine, Israel and the southern border. Hello and welcome to World News America. I'm Caitriona Perry. At least 50 people are reported to have been killed and many more injured in a blast at the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza. Those are figures from the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry. The French news agency AFP says its reporter has been at the scene and their footage shows at least 47 bodies recovered from the rubble. Pictures show people digging with their hands in an enormous crater, searching for survivors and pulling bodies from the rubble. The Jabalia camp, made up of high-rise buildings, was home to more than 100,000 people and is in an area that civilians had been told to leave. BBC Verify has located the exact position of the blast, which you can see here, and you can see how built up it is. Israel has claimed responsibility for the attack and said it was meant to kill a Hamas senior commander and to collapse Hamas underground infrastructure. Our international editor Jeremy Bone has the latest. And a warning, this report contains some images which you may find distressing from the start. Well, we're joined now by the BBC's diplomatic correspondent Paul Adams, who is in Jerusalem. Paul, you're very familiar with this refugee camp. Just how devastating would this blast have been? Okay, Paul Adams in Jerusalem, thank you for that. As the situation in Gaza worsens, the United Nations Children's Organization UNICEF said it fears children are experiencing generational trauma from the bombardment and the siege. The dire warning comes from UN aid agencies pushing for an immediate ceasefire and access to Gaza. According to the Hamas-run Palestinian Ministry of Health, more than 8,500 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza over the past 3 weeks. Those killed include 3,400 children, with many more of them injured. The UN's High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, also brought up how children are victims in his call for help to the Security Council. And on the southern tip of Gaza, the Rafah border crossing is set to open on Wednesday. The General Authority for Crossings and Borders in Gaza confirmed the opening. It said 81 Gazans who were severely wounded would be allowed to enter Egypt to complete treatment. The Rafah crossing remains the only open crossing point into Gaza after the other two were shut following a Hamas attack. The Israeli President Isaac Herzog has strongly defended Israel's military operations in Gaza, insisting Israel was doing its best to limit civilian casualties, but that it had to target Hamas infrastructure, including homes, because Hamas was using them to launch rockets into Israel. Israel is coming under mounting international criticism for the rising civilian death toll in Gaza and a growing humanitarian crisis. Mr. Herzog was speaking to our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, in Jerusalem. Well, let's bring in Aviv Ezra now. He's the acting general consul of Israel in New York. Aviv Ezra, thank you very much for joining us. We've heard that Israel will let 81 Gazans out crossing through the Rafah crossing to seek urgent medical attention. Can you confirm that, and might that number rise? Okay, we'll have to leave it there for the moment. Aviv Ezra, acting consul general of Israel in New York, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Two of President Joe Biden's top advisors asked lawmakers to provide billions more dollars to Israel at a congressional hearing. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin testified to the Senate Appropriations Committee, and they pushed for Biden's request for $106 billion to fund support for Ukraine, Israel and US border security. Stealing a lot of the attention, however, were anti-war protesters who interrupted Secretary Blinken and called for a ceasefire in Gaza. Standing up one by one, protesters waited for Mr. Blinken to begin his testimony before shouting over him again. Police said 12 people had been arrested. The anti-war group Code Pink acknowledged some of its members were arrested as they called for a ceasefire. Secretary Blinken, meanwhile, did not respond directly to the protesters, but when asked later about the possibility of a ceasefire, he said that would only help Hamas to regroup. The Biden administration argues that supporting US partners is vital to national security, and it's asking for the $100 billion plus package to include $61.4 billion for Ukraine, about half of which would be spent in the US to replenish weapons. For the Middle East, Biden asked for $14.3 billion for Israel's military efforts and $9 billion for humanitarian relief, including for Israel and Gaza. Blinken eventually acknowledged the protests in his plea for funding. Well, with me now is our North America correspondent, Gary O'Donoghue. Gary, what were Secretaries Blinken and Austin hoping to achieve today? Okay, Gary O'Donoghue, our North America correspondent, thank you very much for that. Well, that's it for now. Remember, you can find the latest news and headlines on our website, bbcnews.com. Thank you very much for watching World News America. Bye-bye.
Hello there. For western parts of Europe, the weather still